Hello, everyone, and thank you for making it today, or for those who are watching it online, thank you for joining us. This webinar is about sustainability support for schools, specifically operations managers, and we're sort of focusing on sort of top tips, and we've got three brilliant speakers for you who will all be talking about how they've embedded sustainability through their trusts and their schools, the different steps and actions that they've taken. But just to start you off, for those who are new to Let's Go Zero and don't really know what we're about or what we're doing, so Let's Go Zero is a campaign for all schools, colleges and nurseries across the UK to sign up to show their intent and ambition to get to zero carbon and to prove to government that schools want to change. They want to be the leading sector to decarbonise, and that they have that want and need there, and to prove that that movement for demand is there. There are over, last time I checked, 2,400 schools, colleges and nurseries who have signed up and declared this ambition, which is really fantastic. And we're continually asking for schools across the UK to sign up to prove to government that the movement for change isn't going anywhere. It's only growing, it's getting bigger, and that the network of support and systems of learning is only increasing. And so the government really should be stepping up and supporting that network. So we aren't alone. We work as a huge coalition of organisations. So Let's Go Zero is led by Ashton, who I work for, but we're supported by WWF, Sustrans, Global Action Plan, Fair Trade, Ministry of Eco-Education. I mean, you can see them all on the screen there. And we meet once a month to really talk about how we can work together to support schools to take either their first step on their climate action journey or their next step. And it's all about collaboration and sharing resources and signposting to each other's workshops and what they offer for schools. So we do this through when a school signs up, or school, college or nursery, so all educational settings, when they sign up, they get our monthly newsletter, which offers this signposting and guidance. We also run competitions and webinars, as like today, and we have free resources, including lesson plans, workshop, other campaigns that you can get involved in, and we have a brilliant new project that's starting with our Climate Action Advisors Network, and so much more. And all of this can be found on our website. And if you do have any sort of burning questions about any of this, please do drop us an email and get in touch. We'll be more than happy to answer your questions. But just to highlight this brilliant competition prize that's launching on the 16th of October. So it's the Let's Go Zero OVO Foundation Nature Prize. And there are 25 prizes up for grabs. So please do fill in the application. It's very simple and easy. And it's all about increasing access to nature, increasing students' access to nature, improving biodiversity on your school grounds, and helping support kickstart that climate action in your school. So do keep an eye on our website. On the 16th of October, all applications will open, and they're open for 6 weeks. So you've got plenty of time to submit. And just in case you need our contact details, there they are. So please do get in touch. But without further ado, I would love to introduce Emily Brunton, who is the Sustainability Lead at United Learning Trust, which is the largest trust in England, a group of almost 100 schools from Carlisle, right in the north, to the south coast, including mostly academies, but also some independent ones. And they announced their carbon neutral ambition in 2019, and since then have been working to reduce their environmental impact. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and hand over to Emily.
Wonderful, thank you, Suzanne. Let me just get this slides up. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big kind of advocate, and everyone at United Learning absolutely love Let's Go Zero. We're always saying to our schools how much we just put them towards your website. So it's a real kind of pleasure to be here. I'm going to go through a little bit of our journey at United Learning, who we kind of are, what we're doing within this space, how much we want to help other schools as well as our own, and interweave a couple of kind of 7 top tips that can hopefully help you within your operational roles within school to kind of put this agenda forward and kind of make some real progress towards reducing our sector-wide impact on the environment. So as Suzanne was saying, United Learning is a group of 94 schools. We're made up of 35 primary, and 46 secondaries, and 14 independent schools. And we're all over the country and we're growing. So by the end of the year, we'll be over 100. And we started our journey in 2019, initially by assessing our carbon footprint. That's a classic thing to do. You assess your baseline. And our baseline across our 85 schools at the time was 55,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. And this equated to about 1 ton of CO2 per pupil. And putting it into that kind of context really helped us to kind of grasp what was at stake and what our impact was sector-wide. Although the education sector has a proportionately low contribution to the kind of national grid of emissions, we still have an enormous role to play in educating our pupils, in shifting the way our staff and all the communities that we serve in sort of their behavior and kind of what we do. We then, sorry, I can't quite see. So I think my first tip would be to know your starting point, understand where you're coming from, and whether this is begin with a carbon footprint like we did, or it's creating a kind of a plan or just an audit, a really, really simple one. There's lots on Let's Go Zero. We did both of these. So we did a carbon footprint, as you saw from the previous slide, and then we broke it down into the different scopes. That then helped us kind of figure out where our biggest contributing kind of factors were leading to us, and then helped us kind of drive action. Decarbonisation plans were also commissioned across all our schools, and they basically did an audit of all the sort of sites and where energy savings could be made, where like a new roof was needed. It helped kind of lead into some of our other estates strategy, but that kind of gave us a kind of a base point. There are lots of kind of free resources you can use out there, so you don't have to pay for this kind of thing. So gather as much data as possible. And ideally, you want to present it in quite an interactive and engaging way that from the onset can take your stakeholders with you. So what we did with our carbon footprint was we put it onto Power BI, which is like this data platform page, and put all this information up there so that group-wide, as well as kind of individual schools, could look at their individual footprint and then also break it down. So you can see kind of these pie charts illustrating scope 1, 2, and 3, and then equally going into kind of a third one, which is often always the biggest, that kind of the purchased goods and what people buy. That was also equally broken down. And I think what was really powerful about this was not only was it used as a kind of a tool within sort of inset days or assemblies, as well as within sort of classrooms and stuff like that, it just kind of, it opened the book and it started the conversation from a really, really kind of basic starting point of complete transparency about the impact of what it is that we do. And over time, we hope to kind of improve the accuracy of our footprint, and we update it annually, and all the kind of things that need improvement, such as commuting, which is always really, really hard to capture, are kind of feeding into them. But essentially, presenting it in a really interactive way on Power BI was incredibly powerful. So even if you're just using it on an Excel spreadsheet or simply on a PowerPoint slide, there's sort of really powerful ways that you can kind of engage staff and pupils on this. My second top tip would be really, really clear on your why. At United Learning, we've kind of really crystallized this as our responsibility, but as well as our moral duty. As I was sort of saying at the beginning, we're in the world of educating the future and influencing practice right here and right now. And therefore, we have such a platform, and that platform gives us that responsibility to take an action and to make sure that we're improving what we kind of do. It's encapsulated also within our wider strategy. So it's split into 4 bits, but the main one that we kind of focus on here is our great contribution beyond the group. And we're really interested in kind of improving and ensuring our impact simply beyond the group is really positive. We have an impact on the national education system. So just like Let's Go Zero are really pushing on the government, we want to do the same thing. And we want to show that this agenda is absolutely integral to all that we do, because if we don't, as we all know, there is no other choice. So I would encourage you all to kind of think about your really kind of building blocks. You will have had your data. Now consider what is the kind of underlying why of why you want to make a change. Then, once you figure that out, I think you should try and tell the story of your why. And don't be afraid to kind of really catapult this and tell it in a kind of simple but kind of comprehensive way that sort of aligns with your own morals and your own kind of, strapline. We have these kind of catchphrases below here: ambition, confidence, creativity, respect, enthusiasm, determination. So we've kind of linked the story of our why to them, as well as our wider strategy of great contribution beyond the group. And the way we've kind of captured it in one slide is through this very, very busy one. But essentially it tries to show the building blocks. And overall here show that an average school has a certain number of CO2 equivalent. It also includes our aim. So from our start in 2019, when we sort of did our assessment, we've moved on from that. And as part of our carbon neutral ambition, we want to remove 50,000 tons of CO2 a year by 2030. And how we do that is sort of encapsulated in these 5 boxes. I'll go into sort of some of them and how they are, and they'll sort of weave in later. But hopefully you can kind of see the breadth of which this kind of encompasses. And at the top, you'll see that we're asking for 3 things, or essentially 4 things. A carbon neutral champion within each school. So we've delegated responsibility at a local level to what we're calling carbon neutral champions. The government calls them something different. But it's just a sort of a lead and someone on the ground who can kind of take that. And then there's sort of 3 actions that we're calling for. I'll kind of go into the detail of them a little bit later. Once you've kind of got your why, you've got your data, you've got your understanding, and you may have a big picture as well. I want you to take a step back, and my top tip here would be really focus and simplify your ask. Be really, really clear within your school context or within your trust what it is exactly it is that you want to achieve within the specific time frame. So for us, for the next year, we've asked all our schools to focus on these 3 things: adopt our group-wide energy policy, have 1 meat-free day a week. We don't care if it's a Monday, we don't care if it's a Friday, we don't care how they do it, but 1 meat-free day a week, simply to start that conversation. And because we know that almost 25% of an individual's carbon footprint is attributed to food, it's a really kind of poignant way to begin tackling that. And then we've also asked them to sign up to ReFood, which is a food digestion service. They take food waste and they turn it into renewable energy. And that one has been particularly chosen because it's really, really simple. You literally sign up. There's a very nominal fee. It's like £8 a month. And they come and take your food waste, and you can get pupils involved in that. They can be the little stewards at the bins. You know, they can get really, really involved. So we really simplified our message, and we kind of, it was quite a consultative process to kind of narrow down these 3, and we really wanted to kind of get schools' input on it. And we particularly heard that from primary schools, where kind of capacity is a lot more of an issue, and a lot more they sort of struggle with a lot more than some of our larger secondaries, that doing 3 kind of simple things was sort of like the magic number. And if you're thinking of trying to see how you can apply this to within your own context, I'd recommend that energy is a fantastic kind of start or place to begin. So I'm going to share a little bit of our energy policy, which you're very, very welcome to kind of steal and abuse and use and do whatever you want with. But essentially, our energy policy has the following strapline of turn it down, which refers to all heating are being turned down to appropriate temperatures, and we've put recommendations on what those should be within different areas of a school. Turn it off, so that applies to all lighting that's not needed. And finally, shut it down, which applies to all ICT equipment. And you can see some of the kind of detail around here. So piece of lighting, IT equipment has a sleep mode, if not kind of physically turned down by the individual at the end of the day. Electrical equipment, so that's all your printers, your scanners, including your interactive whiteboards, all that kind of stuff. And then equally catering appliances. We always forget about the kitchen, and we've seen the data, and it can really, really kind of suck up a lot of emissions. So that's our energy policy. My fifth top tip would be to kind of create initiatives that sort of drive engagement. And with that, a lot of material can be really powerful. So linked to our energy policy, we've run lots of kind of energy saving initiatives. They're quite common, but for instance, we run a energy saving week in January, the coldest month of the year, and often when heating sort of prices go up and soar. So we challenge all schools to reduce their energy consumption and their bills as much as possible. And one of our schools did it by 18% within that 1 week. And we always run it from a Tuesday to a Tuesday. So they have to do the weekend shutdown and ensure that everything's off basically over the weekend. Some of the other things we've done is we had one of our carbon neutral champions, so one of our sustainability leads within our schools, interview our CEO, Sir John Coles, and we videoed it, and it's a sort of a 20-minute segment that we're encouraging schools to use within inset days or assemblies or staff meetings, or even within sort of the start of lessons, if that's kind of pertinent, maybe for all the students. And it's just a really kind of visible way in which you can drive that engagement, both from a staff and pupil perspective. Likewise with parents, another thing that we found really useful, and we were really, really privileged to be able to interview Mike Berners-Lee, who's the author of There's No Planet B, one of our regional directors in the North, who's fantastic and really, really passionate about this agenda. Asked him questions that we'd asked our pupils, but if they could question an environmental guru like Mike Berners-Lee, what would they ask him? And we pitched those questions to him, and we split it. It's an hour long, but we split it into little chunks that schools can then use again in kind of assemblies and stuff. Likewise, linking to kind of other global or local events that are going on is really, really useful way to drive engagement. So anything around Earth Day, Earth Hour, the COP events, they're really, really powerful. And we've created like this calendar for champions within schools that kind of lists all the things that they could do. So if a school is really, really interested in outdoor learning, there's outdoor classroom day on the 2nd of November, for example. There's lots of things that kind of you can apply to a local context and adapt to the strength that your context kind of demands, or your school or community really engage with it. My sixth top tip would be about communication. This is always really key with everything that we do within schools, but we found that with sustainability, the more positive it is, often the more likely you are to kind of get a kind of a really engaging and inspiring and impactful response from people. So therefore, our communication, as much as it can, strives to be engaging, it calls for action, and it kind of fosters this culture of sharing best practice. What we're really, really keen to do at United Learning as well, and want to propel this across the sector, is embed sustainability in everything that we do. So it's not just another add-on, and it's not something else that a head or a business manager, or such as yourselves, the operation managers within each school, has to think about. It's embedded in everything that we do. And with that, I dare say, we create a kind of cultural revolution that means every decision that we make. So if we're buying pencils for year 6, we're thinking about, where are we getting those pencils? Who am I buying them from? Where are they coming from? And we slowly create a society and a world in which is not that impacted by the environment, and we're not kind of having a detrimental impact on it. Again, communication should always be kind of evaluated. and we're never afraid to kind of re-ask our schools what's going on, what are the kind of local issues that are kind of creating barriers or meaning that change isn't possible. So for instance, during COVID, we obviously had to kind of pause a lot of this work, and likewise where there's kind of been very, very local issues, there are sort of understandings and kind of compensations made. A final tip would be to ask for help wherever and however you need it. And this is including those in your kind of local context or within your school. Get them to kind of help you carry this really, what could be considered quite a heavy and burdensome bag. We can simplify it by asking someone to help us. So whether that's your business manager, or it's a TA, or it's a site manager, or it's simply a parent, there's so much power in sharing the responsibility of this agenda. I'd also encourage you not to be afraid of using pupil voice and pupil action. They're fantastic advocates for this, as I'm sure you all know, but kind of use them. So in the example of ReFood, we've got them to be the bin people and the bin police. Equally, you can do that in all other kind of contexts. You can have them be the litter bug champions within schools or whatever. And then finally, there's loads and loads of external support that you can really use. And this is where Let's Go Zero is so fantastic. And likewise, UKSSN, who are also really kind of encouraging our schools to really kind of champion and use as we kind of get all the networks and share all our practice. So thank you. There's a little summary. I'm sure these slides will kind of be sent around afterwards. But thank you very much.
That's really brilliant. Thanks so much, Emily. Really, really fantastic. I loved the carrier bag metaphor. I hadn't heard that before. And actually, we always encourage schools to share the workload, but you can really picture the carrier bag, when your parents, when you were younger, came with the shopping, you all had to muck in and get the bags out of the car or whatever. So it's brilliant. I've just got a couple of questions, and I do encourage others in the audience to also ask questions through the Q&A box throughout the sort of next 35 minutes we have, because there will be time to answer your questions. But just a couple of initial questions for you, Emily, which was, you asked all your schools to do those 3 actions. How did they react? Did they react well with the 3 action plan?
I'd say overall, yes. There've obviously been kind of some schools have responded better to it than others. The second one seems to have been the most controversial. So the meat-free day a week has sort of landed for various reasons, kind of not as well as we kind of hoped. I would say we asked for these 3 things kind of at this stage of our sustainability journey where we've come quite far. And because it was such a strip back from the year before, it was I think schools, I hope schools, responded to it kind of really well because it was simple. It wasn't this kind of overwhelming, oh my God, how do I solve the climate crisis? It was just kind of really simple. But yeah, I think that second one probably was the hardest to land. The energy policy is interesting because we really tie it with kind of cost savings that can be made, and business managers love it. So for them, I think it's landed really well. I think monitoring that and kind of keeping it going is obviously going to be key.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Emily. That's really great. And how do you communicate all the actions that the schools are taking? So do you share internally throughout the trust? Do you share externally to parents? Because it's that side of it is really important also.
Absolutely. We're mostly focusing on the 3 messages, for example. They're sort of internal, so they're to our schools, and our main kind of forms of communication are through our carbon neutral champions. So we meet with them kind of half-termly. Equally, it's fed through education teams, so through regional directors and then sort of through the head, and then through the VP, who's then responsible for it. Likewise, our CEO, whenever he does a kind of update to heads or kind of chairs of governors as well, they're a really important network to kind of tap into. He's also really good about kind of mentioning this and kind of reiterating that it is a priority.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much, Emily. We will come back at the end for more questions, but I'd just like to introduce our next brilliant speakers. So we've got Helen, who is the Deputy Chief Operations Officer for the Priory Learning Trust. She's a fellow and trustee and SRMA of ISBL, as well as an advisory panel member for the Association of BAME Business Leaders in Education and co-chair of the operations group for the UK School Sustainability Network, alongside Paul Edmond, who is also co-chair of the UK School Sustainability Network, who is the Chief Finance and Sustainability Officer of Academies Trust, sorry, I've lost myself, in Bedford, and a trustee for the Diamond Learning Partnership Trust, also the ISBL Fellow. So absolutely amazing amounts of knowledge and experience in sustainability. So please do ask them loads of questions, but I'll hand it over to Paul and Helen for their presentation. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Suzanne. Right, I'm going to share my screen. Whilst I share my screen, Emily, that was amazing. And as I said earlier, every time I listen to somebody else talk about what they're doing, I go with a million different new ideas. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So Helen and I are going to talk through. So we're going to talk through our sort of climate action journey a little bit from the perspective of our own trusts, but also from the perspective of UK School Sustainability Network, which is a network Helen and I, particularly on the ops side, have been leading for the last couple of years. So we're going to talk about three areas. One is about the climate action plans that we've developed for our own trusts. One is about what we sort of term as rewiring education, which is a little bit sort of lends itself into what Emily was talking about earlier. We don't see this as about creating something extra. It's not creating a new function. It's actually about changing and rewiring what we're doing. It's about changing a culture and changing a way of working. So we're rewiring rather than adding to. And then we're going to talk a little bit about purposeful collaboration. And part of that is working with Let's Go Zero. Part of that is working with UKSSN and some of the brilliant organisations that are out there that help driving this forward. So if I pick up the first section on climate action plan, and really, I think the starting point for Heart was about the why. And this is, again, a little bit what Emily was talking about. I've called it making a business case, but really there was an element of winning hearts and minds about this. And Heart sat down after COVID, well, as we were sort of merging from COVID, and really had a look at the purpose of a trust and what trusts are here for. And we decided actually we're here more than just running 4 schools in a sort of traditional way. We can make a difference. So part of the why was sitting down with our trustees, our governors, all of our staff and our communities, bringing the communities in to sort of set our case as to why we think this is important. We happen to frame it around the Sustainable Development Goals. We do an awful lot around the Sustainable Development Goals. We also talked about regulations and the regulations that are coming, and this was just around the time the DfE was bringing out their Sustainability and Climate Action Plan. But really, it was setting out all those important areas of an organisation, saying actually, if we invest time and effort in sustainability and climate change, there will be a really positive return for the organisation. So that's where we started. We started with trustees. We started with bringing everybody together for trust training days, and then we started making those business cases, those asks to individual teams. So we sat down with catering teams, we sat down with cleaning teams, and we spent that time with them to really sort of explain why we were doing this and get them to feel they were part of it, to feel they were involved with it. We then sort of sat down and said, right, how are we going to do this? And I suppose the framework we hang it on is our climate action plan. We started with using the DfE's Sustainability and Climate Action Strategy as a starting point. We looked at the National Governance Association, we looked at Let's Go Zero, we looked at UKSSN. There's lots of climate action plans out there. We started with one, and then we've basically added to it. So every time we sit down and talk to somebody, every time we listen to Emily at United Learning, I'm sort of thinking, well, how does that fit into our climate action plan? And we add and we add and we add. And we're fortunate with the UKSSN, we've got a lot of colleagues who are happy to share their climate action plans and push them out there, so we can take the good practice that's already going on and add to it. We've broken it down at heart into sort of 5 key areas. One is about governance, one is about the education and careers, so really thinking about those school development plans and how this fits in with them. One is about data and capturing that data and what we do with that data. One is about actually, from a very operations perspective, rewiring what we're doing. So changing each of our individual strategies, each of those departmental strategies, to make them a sustainable strategy. And then thinking about actually how do we might look at how we improve ourselves, but we think it's also important that we're working with colleagues across the sector. So how do we collaborate both to learn and take really good practice, but also share what we're doing? We think that's really, really important. A couple of just, I suppose, bits around that framework before Helen sort of picks up on the rewiring area. Governance. We talk a lot about governance in our trust and the importance of it, and making sure there's frameworks of support and accountability there. Now, we recognise quite quickly that the DfE's initial strategy had no real accountability in it. There wasn't an accountability to the sector, that the sector really had to act. There was a call to act, but no real framework that encouraged us to act or kind of forced our hand to act. So we said as a trust, actually, well, in that case, we need to create our own. In the absence of accountability that's external, we will create our own internal. So we looked at our governance structures and we set up a green governance group, which was bringing together representatives from all our local governing boards to come together, so they can drive that accountability. They can hold us as the executive team to account for it. They're also brilliant in offering loads of support and advice, and actually a fantastic route into the community. So many of them are local community based around our schools. They can actually bring it to life a little bit more with what's going on in the community. And we have a trustee, so we have a trustee who leads on sustainability and climate action. They sort of head up that governance group, but they bring it back to the board to make sure what we're talking about in individual groups is infused in the trust development plan, in the trust risk register. So we know from the top down, there's a framework there and there's a sort of strength there. They also signed up to the National Governance Association's Greener Governance Pledge, which we think is a really important statement of intent. And this very much speaks to Emily, although we haven't got Emily's Director of IT, who I know and is very, very good at this sort of stuff. But we said, actually, you've got to capture the data, because you're not capturing the data, you don't really know where you are, and you're then not able to really measure your improvement. We looked at scope 1 and scope 2. They're very relatively straightforward for most schools and trusts to capture, but we said early on, actually scope 3 is going to be a really important area. So all those carbon emissions that are associated with what we buy and what happens outside our school, they're really important and actually make up a much larger proportion of the carbon footprint than I think most people realised. And part of our strategy is working with other people. We're not a really big trust, so we looked at external partners who we could talk to, who we could engage with. And there's a few listed on the slides. We work with Planet Mark, who work with schools, but they also work with a lot of private business and all sorts of organisations in climate strategy. Fantastic organisation. We work with Energy Sparks on gas and electricity and how we can reduce that and how we can measure it. And we work with Value Match, who are an organisation who are supporting us on our procurement. So what we buy, how do we measure the carbon footprint? How do we measure the sustainability of what we buy? We're looking at biodiversity with the launch of the National Education Nature Park last week. And we happen to work with a local organisation called PECT, who are based in Peterborough, on how do we change the nature of our outdoor spaces. So really a lot of this data capture is thinking about which are the partners we want to work with to make this really as easy to do as we can, but also engaging. So how do we make it that we can present it back to people so they can feel part of it too? So that's kind of the framework. I'm going to hand over to Helen, who's going to talk more specifically about how we rewire education.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Oh, I was going to say next slide, but never mind. Okay. Oh, is that so old school now? So yes, thank you very much for inviting Paul and I to this session. Really, really looking forward to it. And thank you, Emily, for what you were saying. I think there were some really key gems in there, and I will be referencing them a little bit in this next section. So we split down the how into various areas, as Paul said. First of all, it's make use. A top tip would be to make use of the current information that you've got out there and the current frameworks and the support that's there. So things like the good estates management for schools, the GEMS. Look at what it says about how to create resilience about extreme weather. Look at what it says about how you could use your capital expenditure, things like that. So make use of what you've already got out there. Paul already said we've got loads of resources on our UKSSN Ops Group website. So if you can't start from scratch with an estate vision or estate strategy, somebody out there has already got one. Ask, because it can then inspire you to create something unique to your setting. Because what I would say is, don't download something and put your badge on it. That won't work. You have to make it unique to your setting, to your staff, to your students, and to your local community. So it's really important to be inspired and use it as a basis. We've already talked about Energy Sparks. It's a great a great organisation. We were fortunate enough to get some funding for the first year to engage with Energy Sparks. We're now paying for it for I think it's 7 of our schools. There's actually we're 3 secondaries, 6 primaries. We've got a 6th form and 5 preschools, and all of those are engaged with Energy Sparks. But 3 of those schools, actually 3 primary schools, are having it funded through some grant funding, which is great, which Energy Sparks arranged. And it was incredibly competitive. Our ops managers, yeah, I thought they were all nice, calm people, but they're actually incredibly competitive, and they were trying to get to the up their ranking basically by embedding these initiatives that Energy Sparks were suggesting. So you don't have to create the initiative; they're there. Do this; it will help reduce your energy. Energy Sparks have created that for you. We've also undertaken water audits because actually there's quite a lot of energy involved in transporting of water and cleaning water. So if you can manage your water effectively, you're also improving energy consumption. So it's also using information that's already out there, like DEC, your display energy certificates. There will be recommendations in there. So you don't necessarily have to go out and get new information. You've already got, hopefully, some of that information within your school. So use those recommendations. As a trust, we were very fortunate to get a SALIX grant for the heat decarbonisation plan for the skills part of it. So we basically had our heat decarbonisation plan paid for by SALIX. And so when we had the energy efficiency funding come through last autumn, we were able to straight away look at our decarbonisation plan and say, right, what are we going to do? What's our priority? And we chose to remove 2 oil boilers from 2 of our small primary schools and replace them with air conditioning units. And we're actually now going about putting in solar panels on those schools. We're talking to a local energy company that have basically got solar panels, and they have their profit they want to invest back into the local community. So they're looking to help us put some solar panels on our buildings. So there might be something out there near you that does something like that. So maybe engage with your local chamber of commerce for things like that potentially. I'm going to stop talking about estates now. I'm going to go on to next slide, please. And I'm going to start talking about grounds. This is an area that you can really make a difference, a visible difference to your school area. Mindful that there are also that you have to use the grounds for lots of different things. So this is something that you can really engage with stakeholders within your school to make sure that you're using the ground how you want to be using it in the future going forward, and that everyone's agreeing that you're going to make an area a meadow area, or you're going to rewild it and celebrate that rewilding. explain why you're doing it. You know, like Emily was saying earlier, explain your why, tell your story of your why. Biodiversity is a really great example of doing that. And again, there's funding out there for free trees and seeds, and you can engage with the local community again, which I think is really important, because if you're telling them that the reason why the grass at the front of your school is really tall, it's not because no one can be bothered to cut it, it's actually because you're trying to create an opportunity for people to engage with nature. And I think that's really strong. I'm going to say next slide because I'm very conscious of time. Please, thank you. Okay. So we talked about the engagement, and Emily talked about focusing and simplifying your message. And I think that's really important, because you have to bring on, we're all incredibly busy people in schools, and we have to bring them on board with this agenda, because actually this is all about changing behavior. And if we can change people's behavior in schools, hopefully they're going to change their behavior at home and within their own little network. So bringing people on board is really, really important. There's also like Emily was saying about sustainability champions. I would suggest that's a really good thing. I'm mindful that someone might think that, oh, well, there's a sustainability in the champion in school, therefore it's their responsibility. I would go one step further and say, just like health and safety and safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, so is sustainability. So try and get those sort of messages into your school's culture, I think would be really important. Recruitment and retention. I think going forward, there will be younger generation are going to want to work for employers who are mindful about the sustainability agenda. So if you can really showcase what you're doing in your schools, you might actually appeal to people who actually want to come in and help you on your sustainability journey, which is really great. Be mindful of greenwashing, but I think we're going to talk about that when we talk about procurement a bit as well. Training. It says in the sustainability and climate change strategy that carbon literacy training will be rolled out to in every school. Engage with that, because I think if we can make people aware of what's going on, then that will help with the behaviour changes that we want to bring about. Next slide, please.
I'm just going one little hint from me on the people strategy. We have just very recently changed our sort of, standard interview questions, and everyone has a couple of set questions for every role. One of them is now linked to climate sustainability. So almost from before you've started at the trust, you're being asked about it and what you think of it and your role in it. So just a little thing.
And actually, Paul, feeding off from that, I'm asking the question of our head of HR, how are we getting this in our induction? How are we embedding right from the get-go about how we want you to operate within our trust? So yeah, that's really important. Next slide.
There we go.
Okay, digital strategy. Massive. If you are thinking about replacing a server in the next couple of years, could it be in the cloud? So there's some massive big infrastructure things that you can make a big difference about, but that needs planning. So that goes back to your climate action plan and your estates and I can't remember the word, the capital spend, all that sort of stuff. It's a massive bit, isn't it? So plan that in advance. Be mindful about the energy efficiency. I think it's a bit of an urban myth that you have to have an air conditioning, your server in an air conditioned room. So be mindful of that. So when you're looking at doing your energy audit, actually what temperature should this room be operating at? Do I need air conditioning going on all the time to bring it really, really cold? There could be some changes in your process there. Also, the circular economy part of it. So you've got, do you need to buy brand new hardware all the time? Can you buy recycled? Can you add to the recycling of hardware? So talk to your head of IT, or if you are the head of IT, network with other people to find out what they're doing and what works well, because it might work well in a corporate situation, but might not work well for a small school. And if you're a local authority school, you might not have that much contact with IT support, and you might feel like you're on your own. So do network with others around that. It doesn't mention it on here, and I know digital, it's not really digital, but I want to talk about laminating. We do not need to put plastic on something, bit of paper that can be recycled. So if there is a simple thing that you want to take back to your school, I would say, Emily talked about her 3 simple things. One of them would be ditch the laminator, because you can make a massive difference just by doing that. Another thing Emily talked about was about recording your data. And I think, again, with the digital strategy, if you record how much paper you're currently using, and then via your digital strategy to have the printer that will only print when you type your code in, so that you're not sending stuff to the printer and lots of stuff's piling up, you will then overall reduce your paper consumption. You can then tell people, we used to have a building 10 stories up of paper. That's how much we consumed in a term. We've now reduced that to 5 stories. That very visual thing, I think, really helps people, and they might be horrified at how much paper they're using, but there is software out there and there are products out there that can help you reduce your paper consumption. And also challenge these suppliers to provide you with greener options. So don't think just because they're not offering it to you that you can't ask them. Offer it, challenge it, because we need to change the system around us, and they will only know that if we tell them that we want it to change. Next slide, please.
Now, just jumping on that, Helen, I would say
Yeah.
on this one, probably more than most is collaboration, because I've found, talking to other schools and trusts about their digital strategy, particularly some of the larger trusts who've got more established in-house digital teams, IT teams, there's some fantastic, like United Learning actually have been brilliant. Chiltern Learning, which is local to us, absolutely fantastic. So that engagement, that talking to those digital leaders and IT leaders of other trusts, I think there's so much we can learn from each other. Definitely.
Okay, I think the next one's about procurement and waste strategy. This is Paul talked earlier about the rewiring of the education system, and procurement is a massive area where you can impact. And just look at, you're buying something anyway, and now look at it with a green lens. How can I make this better? How, if I'm buying something, how am I then going to use it, and how am I going to throw it away? Because there is no way, it has to go somewhere. Can it be recycled? Can it go back into your circular economy? Think of the product from use right to the end, and I think then we could end up changing what we're buying. Emily spoke about buying pencils for year 6. Well, how really think about it. And I know I haven't got time to think about it. Actually invest that time, and then you're just going to be applying those principles every time you are going to be buying anything. And also the procurement process, maybe you can do Google Forms or Microsoft Forms or whatever in the to actually take away paper out of an existing process that you've got, so your teachers don't have to fill in something on a bit of paper. You can do it electronically. And again, it's talking to the suppliers. They have their own sustainability goals to meet and achieve, and they might be desperate to engage with a school, with a trust, a local authority that actually wants to try the green approach. So they might actually want you to be a case study. So ask the question, and then prioritize in your spend that those suppliers that are doing the good things and working with you. And then the waste reduction strategy, that is massive as well. So when you are retendering for your waste, think about every element of it, not just your bins, not just your normal waste and your recycling bin. Actually, those waste management streams, how can I make them better? How can I spread it across more opportunities to recycle? So we've done a waste management audit as well. So we really broke down and understood where our items were going when they left our school. And I think when you know that, when you've got that data, it's you can then make some changes, as Emily was saying. Paul, did you want to say anything about procurement and waste?
No, only that coincidentally, I had a conversation with our food and drink supplier this afternoon, and it was all about what they're doing and challenging them to do more. And they know they're kind of on notice. They're doing some brilliant stuff already, which is great, but we're pushing them to do more. So just that simple engagement with them and saying, this is what we expect now. So how can we work in partnerships to achieve it?
And actually, Paul, I was meeting with my caterers today. So, and the sustainability agenda is part of our contract. It's part of our KPIs. We're looking, they're telling us now. So rather than us telling them, we want them to do this, this and this, they're coming with it to us now with ideas. So once you start the conversation, it can really make some changes. So if we can move on to the next slide, which I think is catering. Yeah, that's fab. So Emily talked about the fact that the introducing a meat-free day was had proven to be a bit of a challenge, and I understand that. And actually, if you take away the label of making it, this is our meat-free day, and maybe people won't notice it. So if you're talking about, oh, we've got vegetable pie, rather than saying meat-free day, here's our vegetable pie, just call it vegetable pie, and you're not then doing a fanfare about it. And then slowly it will sort of ease in. And we've noticed that in our menus, there's in our primary schools we've got a 3-week menu, and on one of those weeks we've only got meat twice in that week. And that is a slow evolution, but we didn't make a big deal about making something meat free. We also have reduced, we've taken out, we said to our caterers, we don't want you selling single-use plastic at all. So we've made massive savings, and I haven't got the exact figures to hand, I'm really sorry, about how many plastic bottles we've taken out of the system. And we gave all of our secondary school students a reusable bottle, and we've encouraged them to drink water. So we've then reduced the amount of waste around our site. We've removed the amount of time that a caretaker has to empty a bin, and we've taken out single-use plastic from the system. Packaging is really important. There are and that's sometimes where you can have a bit of greenwashing going on, because you think, oh yeah, that can break down in normal composting. Actually, what's normal composting for some of these wrappers is quite high temperature composting, which if your local authority isn't providing, then you're not going to be able to break down that. So be really mindful of the food waste. Also, with our caterers, they're going around doing an audit of all their catering equipment, because actually if you've got a freezer door that's got a seal slightly broken, then straight away you're not being as efficient with energy. And I'm really mindful we want to have questions. So I wonder whether we just go to questions now so that people can ask, because you've got 6 minutes left. I can see poor Suzanne willing me with her eyes to stop talking.
No, I mean, we'll wrap up questions very quickly. So if you do want to summarize your final points.
Okay, I would summarize the final point with: do things that work for your schools. So for example, we've got pre-love proms in some of our schools, and others have a real concentration on transport, so motorist stars engagement. So I think create things that work for your schools, even though you're maybe in a trust or in a local authority, make it unique to your setting as well. Paul, I'm going to hand over to you.
I'll talk very, very quickly about collaboration. And it's just really to finish off to say there's so much support out there. So make it purposeful collaboration. Find those groups or those people who you can really work with in partnership, and over time have a real impact with. I've put a few on there. Let's Go Zero, obviously doing an amazing stuff. Global Action Plan and Transform Our World, who head up UKSSN, who have really supported the development of UKSSN Ops Group. But there's plenty more. We've just started working with CAPE, Climate Adapted Pathways for Education, thinking about the education side of climate sustainability and how we can support that, and how that then fits into the curriculum. Fantastic organisation. There'll be different organisations, different parts of the country, and equally different trusts in different parts of the country doing brilliant stuff. So find that support, because it is absolutely out there. You don't need to pay for it. And I will hand back to Suzanne.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Paul and Helen. That was absolutely amazing. So much information there, and all the links and useful extra add-on bits will be uploaded alongside this recording. So they should all be either under or above this recording. Otherwise, get in touch with Let's Go Zero and I can share them all with you. But just before we finish, I will have a look at some questions that have come through. Let me find them. And I think actually the first question, I might open it up to all three of you. So Paul, Emily and Helen, please feel free to respond, whoever wants to. So if your schools do have these carbon neutral champions or sustainability leads, I know, Paul, I think it was you who mentioned it should be a whole school-wide, oh no, Helen, it was you who mentioned it should be a whole school-wide thing, like safeguarding, everyone should take some bit of responsibility. But if someone is sort of overseeing it all in the school, are these champions or leads incentivized in any way? Do they get paid time, or is it an add-on to their current role? How do you manage?
If I can jump in about ours, because I know we're probably all quite different. Ours, we said early on, we're going to pay them, and we're going to make it a real role. We're going to give them either time off timetable or time away from their current job to actually be able to dedicate that time for training, for support, and to really think about those as we roll out different initiatives. You've got somebody who can grab hold of it and really run with it in the school. They know their local school, they know their local context, they know how different people respond. So we said, actually, this is really important. So we want to actually pay people to do this rather than just assume that they're going to run with it and hope that they do.
I'll be the complete contrast and say that very, very unfortunately, we don't pay our carbon neutral leaves, however much I would love to, and I would give them my salary and then some just to do it. But we are trying to get it so they can get like TR1 points and sort of things like that. So they're sort of incentivized in that way. Equally within CPD, kind of a sort of a way in through getting like promotions or stuff like that, or just kind of developing if they're kind of passionate about it. But no, long term we'd kind of love to do that, just because it is a priority, and we really hear that it's time that's so valuable as well, and that can just be so hard.
Yeah, our ops managers lead it within our schools, and it's actually, I should have mentioned it in the people bit, it's part of appraisal targets as well. So they then cascade it out to others within, like the facilities manager and office manager and attendance officers and stuff like that. So they can, it sort of flows down from there really. But we don't pay them, no. Well, we do pay them, their salary.
No, brilliant, thank you. And it's nice to hear the different ways of doing it, because not all schools have the extra budget or capacity to, and so actually incentivizing it in different ways, either through extra training or through key targets that you have for your own personal development, that's brilliant to hear also. I realize we have 1 minute to go, so I think what I'll do is I'll send round a summary of all the questions to those people who have registered, and we'll try and answer them via email. But just to end, one very quick top tip of how any school starting on their sustainability journey, what should they do? I'll go to Helen.
Oh, great. I would say just start, just make a start. You might get it wrong, but don't worry about it. I think if you show intent and you start moving towards it, that's it. All you can do is make a start.
Yeah. Cool.
I'd go hearts and minds, and you go back to the why. Why are we doing this? And you can't repeat that enough to big groups of people, to small groups of people, to individuals. I say you get that message over and over and over and allow it to feed into the culture.
You guys have chosen the best ones. But I'd probably add that and say, go where the energy is. So wherever it is that within your specific context that you're finding there is appetite or kind of passion, go with that.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you all. That's such a brilliant way to end this webinar. Thank you, Paul, Helen, Emily, for our speakers for brilliant presentations, brilliant tips throughout, and links throughout for everyone to go away and hopefully start adding to their own climate action plans and stealing ideas. And thank you for all of you who are joining us either currently now online or watching the recording in the future.